Morning, folks. Duncan here at Free as an Eagle. I'm up at the A-frame, and this is a sort of shitty day. The weather's not super great, and I've been working all week, so I'm a bit tired and beat. So I'm actually going to take the time to do a little bit of an in-depth cost analysis on this so far, just to give you some of the nitty-gritty stuff. I'll turn the camera around so you can actually see. Okay, so I am up here now on a rainy day, and it's let up a little bit, but it's not a great day. But anyway, so we started doing plywood a couple of days ago. So we have the frame itself pretty much complete, except for the far end where there's going to be an overhang. And my brother Al, with his mechanical genius, has created a system where we have 5 different rigs with pulleys on them that are allowing us to very safely pull the plywood up. And I'll give you a little technical on this because it's actually really interesting. We're doing this whole project kind of an as-you-go. I started out with a set of plans that I downloaded free from some time back in the 70s. And the interesting thing is we started out, I basically abandoned the plans very quickly and started to upgrade and modify things so that we'd end up with a more efficient design and we'd have more flexibility. Earlier on, I was going to do this on a frost-protected monolithic slab to save money. And as you're going to see later from my cost breakdown, there's so much money other than what you spend on materials and on the foundation that by the time you add up the project costs, it ended up being a really good move to do a full basement. So Al talked me into doing that. So we went with an 8-foot ceiling and the interior of a 24 by 36. You're really not going to be able to see much in here, but I'll view into the cellar for a minute. So yeah, so I've got a full basement here, and once this whole foundation was done, we began to build above this and ended up with a very nice bit of space down there that will come in very, very handy. Because an A-frame, people warned me, they said, oh, an A-frame, there's no interior space, da-da-da-da-da, you're not going to have any storage. So I began to think, yeah, you double the basic space available and you create a nice cool environment down there if it gets hot. And then you end up with, actually this A-frame, I thought it started out thinking it was going to be on the small side. And as we build and build, it's become quite a sizable little building. And I'm pretty happy with the fact that it's as big as it is because there'll be plenty of interior space. And there'll be a second floor and even a tiny little 3rd floor loft that's going to be very cool. So we've done a lot of the framing, and today I was going to come up here. I've got a buddy actually coming up in a little bit because we started with the second course of plywood for the simple reason that we could put a ledger there to hang it from, and then I didn't have the hurricane straps in. I'll give you a little close-up here. I'm going to modify this design, but we ended up, you have your typical hurricane ties. This is a hurricane tie right here, this little metal guy. And that will link, say, the rafter to the base plate. But what you're looking at here, the joist box, this here, okay, so you've got your rafter end of it. I'm tying into a little bit of this rafter, but I'd really like to get into some more meat there. And then these little hurricane ties are meant for smaller applications. So this ties this into the joist box, but the base plates, okay, if I swing over here, the green plates that are actually tied into the foundation with bolts, this is what you want to lock into. We've got some pretty heavy bolts connecting the joist box to the green plates, but ideally we tie into the green plate and go up onto the rafter, and then in the event of a hurricane or a tornado or something terrible, these fasteners are smaller and they're just toe screws. They would rip out in a heartbeat. But if you have metal, joist hangers and metal strapping is very strong and very hard to rip out. So we bought these larger pieces that are 2 feet long, and I cut one of them in half. I installed one back here. I'll give you a quick look at it. I was experimenting to see what would work. So you can buy screws that are actually strong enough. Normal deck screws will break off, so these are special screws that they sell to tie these straps in. So I sank a couple of them at an angle into the green plate down here. The foam is kind of covering up the green plate, as you can see. If you get over here above this window, there wasn't any foam here, so you can see where the green plate is sitting on the foundation itself. And so I took a strap here and I tied it into that, and I ran it up and then put an angle on it to tie it into the rafter, but it really should be more of a straight line. The hurricane ties are designed to go around a corner. So my plan now is to take these metal straps, and all I'm going to do is take a section of this metal strap, put it down where I can tie it into the green plate, and then actually drill extra holes so I can tie the hurricane strap into it, and then send the screws through both of those so it'll effectively make them one. And then I'll tag in a piece of this metal to get a little more reach onto the rafter. It'll make it go up at a little bit of an angle. That saves the trouble of trying to bend all these guys. And a guy gave me a whole box of these regular hurricane ties. So anyway, the plan is to link all these to give them extra strength. Then what we can do, we'll pull that ledger board off that allowed us to sit the plywood on it, and then we'll be able to put the bottom sheets on. We'll just push them up till they hit. And then the nice thing is these rafter tails, we want to be about 3 inches lower so that we can run a horizontal board to close in the gap that you see along the bottom here. We'll be able to close that gap up and have still a little bit of overhang. You want plywood to stick past anything that's framing that's above it. And then when you run your drip edge and your roofing, the water has no way to backtrack and get where you don't want it. So anyway, I'm going to take a second to explain. My brother Al comes up with some wild ideas. This idea with the pulley, you'll see we've got, excuse me, so we got a rope going through a pulley, and then this rope is for pulling the pulley back down after you've pulled it up. But the coolest thing is this rig allows you to reduce the effective weight of something. So we actually, with the plywood, let me zoom on where some holes are. What we've been doing is drilling holes in the plywood. Yeah, I've got to get up here a ways to even see where it is. So what we're doing, you can see a hole there. And what we're doing is tying off, and my brother came up with a pretty neat little system where we can hook the rope to the plywood in such a way we can release it later without climbing up ladders. The whole idea, we're getting older. I'm 65 now. Al's 63. We're brothers. We're working on this project, and we are getting to a point where we don't want to work too hard. I'm making as it is. We want to make this really safe, and we want to make it easier mechanically. So we're going for safety, we're going for efficiency, and we're going for not beating the crap out of our bodies. So this rope and pulley system, we installed 5 of these different uprights up there, each with its own set of pulleys and ropes. And the neat thing about that is we can take a piece of plywood, drill holes in either the center or the ends, depending on where it's going, set it here, and just hook up the ropes to it. And then one guy gets on the inside, and what we're doing is using a system of 3 pulleys on each one. And the principle works this way. One end of the rope ties to the load, which is a sheet of plywood, weighs about maybe 50 pounds. We're using 5/8, so it's a little thicker, a little stronger because we're spanning 24 inches. But anyway, we're hooking into this plywood. He can go on the inside, and if you send a rope tied to a load up through a pulley, back down, if you only send it up through a pulley and back down, you're still carrying the whole load up. But if you add another pulley at the bottom and then tie it off at the top, you're doubling the length of the rope, and you're effectively only having to pull half the weight of the load. So you pull 10 feet of rope down, the plywood goes up 5 feet. So now you're making the load lighter and easier. And the rafters weighed 150 pounds, so you needed to have 4 pulleys to reduce the load down to a quarter of what it was, and you could pull it up. But the plywood being a little bit lighter, you don't need that many pulleys. So we get a 2-to-1 reduction instead of a 4-to-1. That's adequate enough. So we've been able to pull all these sheets of plywood up one at a time very safely, pull them up till they land where they're supposed to land, and they just sit on the plywood. Then we've been leaning ladders up. You can see we have some still on the end there with a standoff. So once you've got that piece of plywood in position, we just go up there. We've been just tacking them in with screws, get about 6 screws to a sheet. And as we go up, we're straightening these rafters out. So you can see layout lines on the plywood. And now that we're doing this, when we get up to where we're going to nail it in, one of us can cheat the rafter over if we need to a little bit, and then we'll put the screw in exactly where we want it. So knock on wood, this is probably one of the few times in my life we've had the leisure of not being under any time pressure. Nobody's yelling at us saying hurry, hurry, hurry like my old boss did. So the benefit being we can do it right. And the old contractor expression is there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. Well, we don't want to have to do it over, and we want it done right. So the benefit is we're taking our time, we're doing it properly, we're doing it the way we want to, and as a result, we're not going to have to go back, tear it off, and do it over, which in many occasions I've done. Or you end up with a compromised, kind of crappy job, because I worked with a guy where he would be so in a hurry. We'd be slapping things on, and they weren't level, and they weren't plumb. By the time we got to the top of the rafters, we were inches off, and the plywood had nothing to nail into because things weren't going on properly. And by using a laser, we used a laser, made marks on either end of this rafter frame, snapped lines across it, and knock on wood, we're an eighth of an inch. We're within an eighth of an inch everywhere with this. And when we get to the top, the ridge is floating. Those upper rafters are basically floating. We can move them to get them lined up with the plywood. So when we get to the very top, that'll determine exactly where that ridge is going to go. Nothing's been fastened to it yet. It's just sitting there. 2 pieces, well actually 4 pieces all linked together with pretty heavy hardware. So we will move that ridge into a position that will allow all the lines to be perfectly straight. So that's one of the benefits of taking time and not being under time pressure. So anyway, that's a little rundown on what we're doing. We have 5 of these pulley systems set up. We're going to pull all the plywood up until we get to the top using the system and extension ladders. Once all the plywood's locked in, it occurred to me all of a sudden, well, we got the system in place with these pulleys, we can actually create little cradles, and instead of having to hustle the roof shingles up on up ladders, this is a very steep pitch, so what we'll be able to do is start at the bottom, just kind of standing there to get the drip edge on, and get the starter course and the bottom level of shingles on. And as we go up, we're just going to be able to set the shingles on things that we can then draw up with these ropes. So we're going to leave that whole system set up facing this way until we've got the roof on this side done. Then we can turn those around, those gizmos up top, we'll turn them around and begin to use them on the other side to draw the plywood up, and then eventually the shingles. So this is how old geezers have got to do things so we don't kill ourselves, and we can get it done once instead of having to do anything over. So that's the goal. You know, we've caught most of our mistakes so far, but between the two of us, we're doing pretty good. And knock on wood, we won't have to work backward and take things apart. That's the goal, be efficient. Anyway, I didn't get to the financial part of this equation yet, so I think I'll stop this video. I've got to run back to my house to meet somebody, but I'm going to get into a rundown on the costs so far. So that was a teaser. If you watch this video, you hopefully picked up a little bit. And I was going to say a couple of things incidentally that'll kind of go with the cost analysis, but you know, we're in southern Vermont here, so this little build is two miles from my house, so it's very convenient to get back and forth. My ultimate plan is to use it for short-term rentals and Airbnb kind of thing, even though, you know, I'm going to want to move into it. I don't think I can talk my wife into getting any higher on the mountain or any further into snow country, but I think if it works out well as a rental, that'll be very convenient because we're only 2 miles away and can service it easily. And it's just been a project that I've kind of wanted to do since I was a kid, and I never had the opportunity to take on anything of this scale. So now that I'm a little bit older, I'm actually rolling some of my retirement into this because I'm not done building yet. I really love doing it, and especially I love doing the interior finish in the end, making it really pretty, but you've got to do all these other elements of it first, and it's the first actual build I've done from the ground up. So I really just wanted to experience the learning curve of going right from a piece of raw land to having a build. You know, I spent most of my life doing projects for other people and doing remodeling and, you know, building houses for somebody else according to their timetable and plans, So to be able to actually build a little dream house exactly the way I want to myself, that's kind of a fun thing to be able to do. So I'm thankful that I've had that opportunity, and it is very satisfying to see something go up. And I will get back to you soon with the financial piece, probably later today, and we'll go over some numbers. So I hope you're enjoying watching my little videos, and I'm going to keep them going. I really have wanted to document this so I could share it and have some kind of a record of it. It's pretty cool. So I will talk to you guys later. Thanks.